Zimkinkoma kwalandini. Senenzile laa nto niyenzayo maqabane ndizonixelela niyiphinde futhi do that thing again. You need to like this thing, you need to share this thing, you know, and let's keep it going, let's keep it flowing like the water. So this week, you know, we are in the kitchen and something is cooking, you know, there are nice fragrances in the air, you know, and we decided that, you know, who best to invite onto the show to really just chat about, you know, the value of, you know, the food industry and of course the professional space that resides in that, and how that impacts you as an ordinary person, how, you know, some of the things that you might need to be thinking about, you know, in terms of what these guys are doing and what they're messing up and what they're not messing up. You know, so, you know, again, thanks, Les. Thank you. We've got in studio Lesego. He's a chef, he's a judge, he's an author. What other amazing things are you?
I'm a human being.
And that's the most amazing part of them all. One of the conversations we started with, and you know, it's quite an interesting one and I found quite funny, is one of the episodes we had, we spoke about how, you know, South Africa had become or had higher demand of lime imports from the States, primarily because of the torrent rains in Mexico. But I found out something quite interesting today about why, actually just something I wasn't thinking about in terms of why are limes and berries and all of these things a little bit more expensive.
Yeah, the pain of our existence as chefs. People, this generation of click, 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 click. People see a cocktail, they see a gin cocktail, and it's got the entire fruit and veg market in the glass. And that actually messes up on our side. People are going to put rosemary in there, they put basil, they put cucumbers, and the knock-on effect actually affects our costs as well, because we use the same thing for cooking. So with limes as well, limes are very expensive. And it's because we are competing with various markets for that lime.
You know, so these gin drinkers, I told you, I last week, actually, in the last episode, I said it was these craft beer drinkers, but clearly the gin drinkers are also, you know, bad culprits in terms of what's happening with food inflation in the country. And Ules, the chef, has already told us. But, you know, something quite interesting, of course, we know the debate around, you know, cooks who call them chefs, who call themselves chefs. You know, and then the caterers who call themselves cooks, you know, and of course, anyone can go onto your blog and they'll read about the difference. Anyone, they can go to the internet, you know. But what's the funniest anecdote for you regarding, you know, the difference or the various participants in your industry, the caterers, the cooks, and the chefs?
Wow, hey, you're going straight to the jugular from the top. Hey, all the controversy. I always get asked, why can't I call myself a chef? And look, to get to the level of calling yourself a chef takes a lot of work. You don't really need a qualification, but you need to earn that right. And you need to earn it from other chefs, actually. Yeah. I mean, the first 3 years of me working in industry, I wasn't called a chef. And I had a chef diploma by other chefs. They train you up, and then it's also a rite of passage to get to the level where you can actually wear that funny, well, I don't wear them anymore, those funny hats. So now we live in that era where people think, okay, if I'm good at something, like everyone can cook. And if I can do it to the point where...
Tito?
Oh! Hey, Matala. Shame, man. But what I like about what Tito does is getting guys interested in food. Even if they're knocking what he's making, at least they can say, let me go and show you how to do it better. And that is what I'm all about. I'm all about guys getting back in the kitchen. And people taking that chef term, I fight.
And I mean, it's worth the fight, right? Because you understand the value the name has. You know, there's always a question that, you know, they ask in identity economics and says, what's in a name? And so what really is in a chef's name?
Yes, you have to respect that title. And it's one of those careers where people think you don't really need to work hard to get it. They think it's a hobby that you get paid for. Not everyone does that. And when I started my business, my brand, my goal was to show people what a chef really is. It's why I'm so candid. I'm sure you've seen how I am on social media. I talk about anything and everything. And that is to show people a chef isn't obsessed with food. They're a real person.
Yeah.
But when it comes to food, they're an expert at it.
Yeah.
So if someone asks me a food question, I go full nerd.
Yeah.
And I answer it properly so that they understand that this guy is a normal human being, but food is his career and he is an expert at it.
Yeah.
And I want people to understand that South African chefs are here as well.
Yeah.
We're not just sitting in the kitchen, I'm serving you the food out there. We are real people too.
The sector is quite interesting now. We spoke about how, we've seen a lot of craft beers come out, craft gins come out.
Yeah.
We've seen specialist burger joints come out. And there's the whole debate around food entertainment, food tourism and gentrification and the overlaps there. And again, I know that conversation can go for a while. But some of the stats that I interacted with was that the fast food industry is growing at about 9% per annum. It's a 587 billion rand business per annum. And this is based on 2015 numbers. And so depending on what's happened, we'll probably see that number have grown a little bit. And, first time I interacted with your food was on One Fox when you had the Glenlivet partnering thing. And I remember you had some oxtail and croquette situations going on there. And I was like, this is quite dope. So how would you imagine, for example, then the chefs who cook really great, gourmet, amazing food, how do you think they could transition into participating into these quick service restaurant models to ensure that, we knock down the 28% obesity rate that we've got in the country, as well as to create, economy for the chef outside of, selling time. I always say selling time is the most unsustainable business model in the world because there are only so many hours in the day.
Yeah.
And so how do you imagine, a chef could move into a franchise model, but keeping, the quality of the food at that level?
It's a catch-22 because what you have to deal with in the economy that we have in South Africa is pricing as well.
Yeah.
So as soon as you start gentrifying and turning a commodity that people buy for cheap into something a bit more classy, and you start putting people who are qualified now, it means your pricing is going to start going up.
Yeah.
So it's a balancing act that is very, very hard to do. I try to do it on my end by using emotion in my cooking.
Yeah.
So when I lecture young chefs, I tell them, you grew up in Soweto.
Yeah.
So why is it when you qualify, you start making food that you don't eat?
Yeah.
Your market isn't going to consume what you don't eat because they can tell this guy doesn't enjoy what is made.
Yeah.
So it's all about finding that balance. I haven't found it, so I can't be telling people this is how you do it.
Yeah.
But what I try and do though is play mental games with people. I take things that are familiar to them and I put twists on them, like that restaurant you're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, you looked at that oxtail croquette, and I'm sure before you opened it, you didn't realize it was oxtail.
Absolutely not.
And that is how we can actually start making our food more of a product to sell out to the world. Taking things that we love. I mean, our food is awesome.
Yeah.
I, as a chef, love going back home and eating food made by my mama or my gran or things like that. And we need to find a way of showcasing our skill. Chefs from South Africa are one of the most sought after in the world.
Yeah.
But once we qualify, we go overseas because we don't think there's a market for us. And we need to start taking those skills and taking our emotional connection to our own food and putting the two together.
So, we spoke about, Mr. Mboweni and Ilaki Star. So here's a quick trick, a quick play. You've got Mopani Worms. You've got Ilaki Star. And you've got Ichibuku.
Okay, where are you going with this?
Make us a dish.
No. I'm not part of that, first of all. But you laugh. I was actually, Chibuku went and relaunched, was it last year? And they actually got in touch with me to be part of the relaunch.
Oh, nice.
They wanted pairings with the Chibuku, but Yeah, it didn't materialize, but it was an interesting concept.
But why don't you tell them that, freshly slaughtered bride meat pairs well with chibuku?
Is that what you have? Hey. No, there's certain things from my youth that I can't stomach, and tinned fish is one of those. We had so much of tinned fish as a kid. It's why when people tag me on our minister's cooking and they say, can you make this better? I don't go there. Don't bring tinned fish to me, I can't.
And then, the two things that I think are quite interesting that I'd love us to tap into. You already alluded to, I think, the global relevance of our industry in the food space and chefs in particular. And also, you also alluded to training youngsters who are growing in the space, and so for me, that's a conversation around inclusive growth. So from, with the one conversation around just the brand of a South African chef, what does it mean to build a brand as a South African chef, as well as what does it mean to export a brand as a South African chef?
I didn't have an example.
Yeah.
When I went to chef school, there weren't big black male chef brands out there. Yeah. Even today, I can't think of someone. My friend Benny Masikwa Meng was the judge on MasterChef.
Yeah.
He's the only other male chef from Kukasi who I could say, okay, has built a brand up. But even with him, I was getting on his case once about making a brand out of his name.
Yeah.
It's something that we don't consider. I was lucky in that I went to chef school and I'd come out of corporate.
Yeah.
So I already had that mentality of a corporate brand in my head.
Yeah.
But when I went to chef school, I was like, okay, once I qualify, the first thing I'm going to do, I have to create a name. And I immediately went onto social media and I wanted Lesego, and it rejected that because someone else had taken it. And that was actually a lucky thing for me.
Yeah.
And then at school, they wouldn't say my full name. They used to say Les for short. I don't like being called Les, for example. And I was like, okay, let me play on this. Let me call myself Les the Chef. Yeah. Let me create this brand, this persona. And at the beginning, I was just going to tweet about food. And I decided, no, let me not do that. Let me just be anything and everything.
Because you said you're a human, right? And that means you're multifaceted. You like to travel. You've spoken around how you've done more short lists in the country than most people will imagine that you've done. And that's part of the brand building and how people also start to resonate with you outside of what you do. Yeah,
brands, if you look at it, think of Nike right now, this big campaign they do. They go and channel people's emotions.
Yeah.
Serena wins something and they don't show Serena holding up a trophy. They'll show Serena as a kid coming up and they play on your emotion.
Yeah.
And that is what I did as well. I started telling people my story.
Yeah.
This is where I'm from. I was an everyday Joe working in Sandton, wearing a tie suit like you today, and sitting in boardroom, and I decided, okay, let me go to chef school. Yeah. It was hell. Yeah. Chef school is a hell.
Yeah.
And I don't tell people go to chef school lightly. It is not fun. And I was honest about it. I said, this is what happens. And that honesty went and created a support base from people saying, no, you can do it. Come on, this is... And you show people the 14 hours you're working. You tell people about... there was a wedding. I had double booked myself. And it was for 2 wedding cakes. So 1 wedding cake was for Limpopo, and I delivered my wedding cakes, and I had to drive to Limpopo. As I'm driving on the N1, someone phones and says, we're at the wedding, where's our cake? And I sat there stumped, and I went on social media and explained to people, this is what's happening. Yeah. I've got a wedding in Limpopo that I'm taking a cake to, but there's another one. And I haven't made this cake. And it was a big thing, it trended. But what I was showing people is, even though you might think this business, this brand this guy has built is perfect, it's got its pitfalls.
Absolutely.
And you need to just be honest with people, this is what it takes. Yeah. And that's how I've built my brand.
And what's the mental transition from saying, I'm going to stop what I'm doing and I'm going to recreate a new path? I think that story resonates for many people in many spaces and many sectors, right, where they move from one space to another. And often people just talk about the outcome, I took the leap, right? But, what becomes more interesting is the process, is that what was the mental transition in the process around moving from, being, an ugly Joe like me to being a prettier Joe like yourself, and what was that, what was the process?
I tell people it was when the madness hit. I was sitting in corporate and I wasn't enjoying myself. Yeah. I was earning a lot of money. I was earning a lot of money at the time. I was 25, and people tell you've arrived. You're living in the richest square mile in Africa. But I just was not happy. And I decided, let me quit this thing. I didn't know what I wanted to do at the time. And a friend of mine said, let's go into hospitality.
Yep.
It was just before the World Cup started. And I was like, okay, but I'm stubborn. I don't want to get into an industry and not know what it's about.
Yep.
Let me go to chef school. Let me understand the industry. Ironically, I didn't want to become a chef. I just wanted to understand what a chef's life is like.
Yeah.
And understand what a chef does every day. And in so doing, build a business out of it. And I approach it from a knowledge point of view. Let me understand as much theory as I can. That was the nerd coming back to me. And that is the process I followed. And by focusing on theory mostly, it takes away the doubts. I mean, at the beginning, you're very doubtful about what you do.
Yeah.
And I would fill that space of doubt by reading up a lot. And that is the transition I made from engineering to going to chef. I tried to avoid the real stuff. There's a lot of drama in the industry. I mean, my first salary was less than 2,000 Rand.
Yeah.
And the school that I studied at cost maybe about 200K to get the diploma I did. So the realities of the industry are not fun. They're not easy. They're not glamorous.
Yeah.
But because I had a goal and I'd set a goal for myself, the ultimate goal was to get to the level I am now. That is what kept me focused.
Is there, how much is invested? You know, we heard our president in the State of the Nation address, you know, talking about dreaming, smart cities, and all these, you know, train that can go from here to Timbuktu and back, you know, and maybe, you know, here's an opportunity exactly around, you know, when we're asking where must we invest, where are the target sectors for investment? If chef school is costing 200K and then you come back, you're earning 2,000, you know, per month, you know, and we understand, we've spoken around, for example, the growth in the sector at 9% and the size of the sector in terms of just, and I mean, that's just, take fast food alone, right? If we go into food tourism, we know that, you know, the strawberry, you know, black strawberry farmers in KZN, that people now go pick strawberries, you know, and that's got economic value that it's generating, and the same applies to many other, you know, agri into food type spaces. And so for you, what does investment look like for the sector? If you had to give, Mr. President, here's an elevator pitch, what does investment look like?
Wow, no pressure then. It's starting to change. Literally before we started recording, I was on a phone call from one of the biggest franchise restaurants in South Africa. Yeah. They've asked me to come and remodel the menu, to come and redo it for them, and I'm going to be the face of the new menu. Yeah. So it's starting to change, where they're starting to realize people don't want that corporate, clean, menu and restaurant feel. They want an emotion now. Yeah. They want it linked to someone that they're familiar with now. Yeah. And that is the goal. As I said earlier, the goal is to, not the goal, the way we should target things is by celebrating what we're good at. We are a homely people. We like hosting. We like having people over. Now, when Europeans come over, what do? We sell them the food that they know. Yeah. All these, the big M in the sky. You've got your Burger Kings. You've got your what's a Pizza Hut? You've got your Starbucks. You've got all these franchises that they know, but they're coming to Africa. Why are we giving them stuff that they know? Yeah. So if we were to grow the sector and make it a big economic thing, we have to start celebrating the traditional foods that we have. I was at a talk last week where they were starting to push ditlo, which is a superfood, ground nuts. We've got sorghum. Sorghum is a superfood as well. We need to start celebrating and letting the world know these are the foods that are actually good for you. Yeah. And we twist it that way and start selling it off to the world.
So then on MasterChef, should we have then a segment that says Mogodu Mondays?
Hey, that Mogodu Mondays. That's the other funny thing. Once someone starts a trend, other companies and other businesses start copying it instead of creating their own.
And what becomes the difference between you know, expropriation of you saying let's celebrate what we're good at, our local brands and how we prepare our foods, and then now KFC jumps on Mahodo Mondays, for example. Where is the, because that's a translation of that into an institutionalized and more corporate function of that. And so from an economic value, when do we say that it's expropriation? Or cultural appropriation?
It's up to us as consumers, I think. It's up to us to tell these companies, no, what you're doing is not going to work because you can see that this thing is commercialized. It has to be, I mean, we live in a world of social media, I guess, these days. So if people start, or if we, I'm a consumer as well, start requesting that things are not gentrified by corporates and it's done by someone with a name, like, I don't know, Benny, or it's done by a chef, Luando, chef, wherever.
Like yourself? I mean, let's keep this going. Include yourself in these things.
Okay, fine. But we have to be the ones who request them. Then corporates start to listen, like what this brand who's approached me is doing now. They've asked me to be the face of it.
Oh, that's fantastic. Makabane Sivile from Les the Chef. He's an industry stalwart, and he's really, I think, changing the way in which we view the sector, and we want more guys like you to come through the sector. And you said that at least there's some work in terms of pushing people through. And Mr. President Bumamel and the Awkward Economist, there's a conversation around what it means to invest, I think, in the food sector, and how that also partners with agriculture, agri-processing, and this is what we're talking about, policy cohesion, and that we need sectors that speak to each other. This is the value that we got today from Les the Chef. Unxelele Makabane kanyekeni as creme brulee, and we know that.
I didn't say that.
No, you didn't say that. But in essence, it's really how we've consumed our food in our communities. This is how we've consumed our food in our professional and workspaces. And what does it mean for us to continue to celebrate, I think, the beautiful aspects of our cuisine, that have rich, nutritional value as well as rich economic opportunity. And this is actually why we brought Les the Chef to the show, is because there's absolutely a huge economic opportunity for people in your sector. And thank you very much for joining. Makabane senivile ke bendinixelela bazimke inkomo zenu, at least bazimke zayaphi, zinqunqiwe zayi-beef. And so whenever you're going to Les shows, you understand ba ezankomo zenu ezimkileyo zinqunqwe leli xhego apha ecangkwam. Thank you for joining for this week. Do that thing you do again. Nikumeza, Niku cousin brother, and let's keep it going, let's keep it flowing. See you again next week.